I'm Spencer Mazyck, and joining me now is Michele Coleman Mayes, who co-authored along with Kara Basinger, Courageous Counsel, Conversation with Women General Counsel in the Fortune 500. Michele is a former Allstate GC who has recently joined the New York Public Library as General Counsel. Welcome, Michele. Thank you for joining us today.
I'm pleased to be here, Spencer.
So in writing the book, did you find that there was this secret recipe or success formula that was common to all women who had reached the GC post at Fortune 500 companies?
I feel like I'm channeling my co-author now because that's a question she would normally answer. We divvied up the questions.
Okay.
And what she would tell you is that there's no secret recipe. As much as you'd like to be able to hand someone a simple answer and say, follow these steps and you'll get there, nothing could be farther from the truth. Everyone had a unique way they did it, depending on the obstacles and opportunities they encountered. So absolutely not. If anything, that's what the book wanted. We wanted the book to convey, is there isn't one way to get there.
Okay, so there are no secret recipes, but there were some pervasive themes throughout the book. So of all the themes, though, which would you say is the most important for women who are aspiring to become GCs?
I think the title probably captures what we thought was a very important theme, which is courage. And I have a favorite interview in the book, which is of the Blount sisters.
Yes.
They both are very successful. One is Dean of the Northwestern School of Business, Kellogg School of Business, and the other is the General Counsel of Prudential Financial. And at one point during that interview, Susan says, courage does not stay put. You have to find it every time. And I think that's such a profound way to say it. You can't talk about, I did something really a big deal once, but don't give me credit when I skipped the other 10 times.
You have to be fearless forever, really.
You really do. You really do.
Well, and I want to talk a bit about mentoring, because that's another thing that the book touched on. How do women find mentors in organizations, and must the mentor look like them?
That's another theme that you will find was extremely important. Most of the women in the book will say in some fashion or another they had people who helped them. Few exceptions, but they're rare. And I have found, my own experience, that I've learned more from people who are more unlike me than those that are like me. And so I encourage people to look for strange bedfellows.
Okay, and I want to talk a little bit more about your experience, because as I mentioned in the intro, you are now the GC for the New York Public Library, but you were formerly a GC for Allstate and Pitney Bowes. So, I mean, how did you get to those positions? How were you groomed? How were you mentored for them?
I don't know if I thought of, first of all, I have to tell this story because it ended up being a mentor, but that's not what I would have called her. I would have called her somebody who was interfering at the time she came up to me. But she was a very senior executive at the first company I joined, and she came over to me one day. Her name is Bobette Jones. She's still alive. She's in her 80s. She said, Michele, what are you going to do next? And I literally responded, I'm on my way home. And she said, I don't think you understood my question.
Now, what are you going to do next at this very moment?
And she was the person who planted the seed about my becoming or thinking about being a general counsel. And I literally was baffled and almost puzzled why she did that. And that began a conversation with her where I really said, you know what, I can do this. The reason I talk about the next person, though, because it didn't start out as a mentor. He was my manager. He was the general counsel at Unisys, Andy Hendry. He's now the general counsel at Colgate-Palmolive. And I told him when I was brazen enough, got my courage up, that I wanted to be a general counsel, and he looked at me in disbelief.
Well, did he also feel threatened, perhaps, that you were trying to get his position?
You'll have to ask him that question.
Okay.
I didn't. But he went on to say, well, I don't think you have what it takes to be a general counsel. There's so many things you're lacking. And I said, such as?
Give me some examples here.
Why did I do that? The list was pretty long.
Oh, wow.
But the long and short of that is he subsequently left Unisys, but then reached back, and eventually I ended up going where he was, which is where he still remains, which is the general counsel at Colgate-Palmolive. Because the promise he made me, he said, I told you you weren't ready. If you decide to come to Colgate, because I obviously had to interview, he said, I'll help get you ready. And that's a promise he kept.
So he was a great mentor. What did he do for you exactly? What things did you need to work on?
I was a litigator, and you have to remember, everyone thinks that what they have in their toolkit is what's necessary, and since he wasn't a litigator, you couldn't imagine how a litigator could be a general counsel. After all, you go to court, you don't go to the boardroom that much. That's changed markedly over the years because litigation has become a big factor in the lives of many large companies and involving your board of directors, and it doesn't get much higher stakes than that. But more importantly, he pushed aside what might have been his bias and exposed me to a range of issues and topics. And it was the different positions I had, the different challenges I had at Colgate, all of which led to my realizing that I could do it.
No, that's great. I mean, what I love about your story is that, like you said, it proves that there just isn't one way of getting there. I think it was one of the GCs in the book from Hill-Rom Services who described it as sort of like a bowl of spaghetti.
Yes, Miss Lichtenstein, who has a way with words.
Yes.
It is. And if people think it's a ladder you continually climb, there's probably something that's very misleading about that because you may miss opportunities because you're only looking straight ahead.
So you should try everything that's out there until it works.
Within reason. As I said to someone once when they were laughing about, oh yes, the top 40, under 40, I said, I'll be dead soon. At some point, you have to be willing to say, I'm ready now, even if I don't have the complete portfolio, I'm ready enough.
Okay. Well, so tell me, how did you and Cara come to write this book featuring these extraordinary women?
It wasn't our idea.
Oh.
So let me start there. Lloyd Johnson, who actually is someone who knows both Cara and me, he was the one who brought us together. I didn't know Cara before the book project. He works with S&R Denton in San Francisco. Cara is a partner at S&R Denton in San Francisco. And he pitched the idea, I'll never forget this, in June of 2009. And I thought, well, it was a nice idea, but one I wasn't going to do.
Why, though?
Because I was like, a book? Are you serious?
It's a huge undertaking.
It's a lot, and it's permanent.
So you can't change anything.
No, you have to live with what you put in black and white. And I'd never thought about doing a book. But I'll tell you what I have spent a lot of time doing, which is mentoring. Yes, I talked about Andy and Bobette, who acted as mentors to me, and actually Andy became a sponsor because that is different, that raises the bar. But then I said, you know what, Lloyd's right. I spend a lot of time reaching out and listening to people, many of whom are strangers when they contact me. And as a consequence of that, he said, Michele, you do it anyway, why don't you reduce it to writing? And if you look at the dedication in the book, it really says it's a mentoring tool for people I will never meet and probably will be around long after I'm gone. Right. So that's how we thought of the book.
Well, and how did you choose the participants? Because you didn't speak to every female GC out there.
We would have still been writing the book.
Yes, you would have still been writing the book.
And that's a plus because there are now over 100, 105, 106, I've lost count. But there were folks that were easier to access than others. Everyone wasn't clamoring to be in the book, but that was the exception. But you had to have some framework and boundaries when you said, okay, enough, again. This is adequate to really convey rich stories and lessons and experiences. Let's go with it. I laugh because the folks who were working with us, I finally said, well, I've never had a deadline I didn't miss. And it was true. Every single deadline we set. And so there just came a time when we really wanted to get the work product out there.
Well, and you sort of grouped them too in different sort of sections, the women.
It wasn't that we grouped them as much as the stories probably wove the way they did.
Yes.
And so it made it easier because if you look at the book, you can pick and choose what you want to focus on without reading the entire book.
That's very true.
And that's a plus because we didn't want someone who felt that they were going to have an exam after it was completed. We simply said, what appeals to you? Who is it that you want to know the most about? You can look in the index, read it, and move on.
So you mentioned the book as sort of like a mentor, but what did you guys hope to accomplish? Anything besides that with writing the book?
I certainly did, and it was this. I'm more in the third wave. There were waves of women. That was one other thing we did have, is the way we looked at it. We put the women that were in the earliest grouping of GCs and then worked our way forward. And what I wanted to say to anyone who'd listen, and that's to men and to women, trust me, the audience is
it's a broader audience,
not just
exactly.
gender related
Right.
to women. I wanted to say that what's happened thus far is not an anomaly. That what has happened can continue to happen because it should. And that if you don't have the talented women in this country in your pool of applicants, you've done yourself a disservice, whatever company you're working for, you've done those women a disservice, and you've done the country a disservice.
Well, yeah, and I certainly got that from reading the book. Also, in this broader sense, I mean, is it about facing adversity, beating the odds to accomplish your goals?
It is, and in fact, if you look at the lessons that really resonate throughout the stories, it doesn't matter what profession you're in. This happened to be about lawyers. You could take away that profession, and I think the wisdom that just is replete would still be applicable to people in accounting, in media. It really doesn't matter.
Well, and finally, your successor at Allstate is Deputy General Counsel Susie Lees. How important was it to you to have your successor be a woman?
You know, besides having an ego trip, yes. You know what was important to me is that the company be left, and I'll use this because it's the tagline Allstate uses, that it be left in good hands. And I knew Susie was able to do that. But importantly, when I went to Allstate, it would have been just shy of 5 years. They didn't have a rich pool of internal candidates, and they had 700 lawyers. And I said, there's something wrong with this picture. And I vowed and committed to my boss, Tom Wilson, that when and if I left, and it was to simply be when, that he would have a choice. And that even if he didn't go inside, that would still be his choice, but it wouldn't be because he didn't have candidates to consider. And that's what was important to me, because it sends such a heartening message to folks who are there that you're good enough to make it from the inside to the top.
Well, and it's such an important message, which I think we saw some of that in the book too. So thank you very much for writing it, and thank you for joining us to talk about it. We appreciate it. For more information on this or other topics, subscribe to BloombergLaw.com. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for joining us. Bye, everybody.